Uh, yeah. Anyway, I think hi, I'm Sayak. I'm a PhD geography student at the University of Illinois at Urbana, Champaign. Very interestingly, due to the time zone, I'm actually talking from the midnight, about night. So, so yeah. Uh, I actually in this today's presentation, I want to focus on mostly of night geographies and how the cities of global south or the southern urban theory can contribute to the night studies. The existing literature on night studies is very much still centered around the empirical cases in UK, USA, Australia, US. So that's kind of very different kind of nocturnal urban theory. But the cases of India or maybe the cities of global south, which is very much run through the practice of informality, presented a very different kind of night geography that I want to share with all of you in this presentation. Because I'm talking from the perspective of Indian cases, so just a kind of a brief context. What happened, like India, since applied two things to discourse. First is the National Smart City Mission, which has India have a very lengthy 100 smart city list, which created a kind of expansion of the urban night. The smart city have a kind of a agenda to create a 24/7 functional city. There is also another important thing is happening in Indian context. It is the growing IT industries. So India is one of the prominent place in this world who is supplying the information technology services across the globe. And this India's tech organization mostly work for the companies which is located on Europe and North America. And to follow that time inversion, so most of this Indian IT industry operated during the night time to follow the daytime of the Europe and North America. And it's create a kind of a new spatio-temporal life in Indian context. Smart city. Also India very recently formed a kind of a new nocturnal policy, so which is partly coming from this Regulation of Employment and Conditions of Service Act in 2016. So which is as part of that, India's metropolitan and small cities slowly trying to design few model night shops and retail market. But there is a problem. The problem is that kind of the police or the law enforcement. So India's night experience is very patriarchal and very marginalized. It doesn't have a nightlife before this tech industries flourishes in parts of our country. So there is a kind of a nocturnal policy paradox is happening. So on the one hand, the economy, which is demanded a very active functional nightlife, and on the other hand, the police, the city administration, local administration body, they're kind of truncated the growth of nightlife. So there are a lot of instances where the IT employees or the night workers are often harassed in the street by police. They are always kind of a subject to inquiry, like why are they strolling? So that's a kind of a context that India set into in night. My idea of this Everynight geography is coming from a very strong perspective of informality. So like in India's case, especially, my kind of conceptualization of Everynight practices is inspired by the notion of urban everyday scholarship. Specifically the writing of Asef Bayat and Abdul Malik Simon, where they constantly provoking us to think about like how the political possibility of everyday life intersects with daily routines, different rhythms, and beyond grand claims of revolutionary changes. So when there is a lot of starking inequality, there are less services, how people are deploying certain kind of tactics to have a kind of a conversation with the state, with the system. So that's how I kind of developed this concept of every day, every night geography. And especially in the case of India's nocturnal life, I also see there are a lot of resonance where what this the French geographer Gwensky in 2005 developed a very interesting concept of discontinued citizenship, where is like the provocation is as the night proceeds, as late night, the people from other side of the part of a racial minority migrants group, they're losing their agencies, and they are very much subject to police provocation, police brutality. So that kind of aspect is very much I ethnographically observe in Indian context. So that is my whole inspiration to bring the idea of every night geography. Uh, just another few things. For example, India's urban night culture is very patriarchal. Like it's India's urban night in my ethnographical reading is mostly accessible for man. There are obviously a lot of women employee of this IT industries are working, but for them it's a kind of a brave space. So they need to make a change. And a lot of feminist social movements like Break the Cage, Why Loiter, such kind of movements are happening in Indian urban spaces, like which is taking into consideration of like the political subject of nocturnal liberty and at their center. So uh, that's the thing. So I found, doing the ethnographic observations, because the police force and the law enforcement here is very kind of a stronghold that they don't want to flourish the night market, night transport. They have a kind of try to truncated all the liberation. So I found there's a very interesting tactics that a lot of retail business person in India brought. So they kind of there's a tactics called like downing the shutter halfway and doing business. So this photograph is about a small retail market. So when I go and talk to them, so there's a lot of kind of this half shutter down stores, which I call exist in Indian market. So I just talked to this retail business person. They said police often come and ask us to, that's 11 p.m. past, you need to close the shop. So how will you run the shop? So they what they did, they put the shutter halfway and do business. And when the police person arrives and asks for like, why are you like what is happening here? Like why it's halfway down? They said they're just cleaning, maintaining, they're restocking for the next business days. And that's how they kind of run the business for 3-4 o'clock. So this is a very interesting kind of the tactics and the strategies that this retail business persons are using to kind of operate in this policy paradox. There are kind of a lot of night politics of a night food is happening, especially what I observe in Indian case, the transit nodes like railway station, airport, bus terminus, which have certain kind of legitimacy to do the business, whole night. So as a result, these transit nodes also to some extent emerging as a new night markets, where the IT employees or the smart city employees, even the urban residents, they're going to have food, hang out. So I kind of ethnographically lot of engage with both this retail business person as well as the consumers. There is also kind of very interesting things happening with the lights, especially in the cities of Global South. The whole politics of light is mostly talking about the connection of electricity or not, but smart city kind of do a certain kind of very interactive public space lighting. There is an interesting reading on the right, maybe in my right. There's a photograph of a bus stop, which is in this bus stop, the lights are, it's a smart city project, so all lights are the artificial intelligence operated. As a result, this lights goes off at 11:55. So a lot of homeless sleepers, at this place introduced me that, when the light goes off, they just occupy the bar stop until the morning. And when the artificial intelligence operated light goes on in the morning, they left the place. So it's very interesting how this kind of marginal people is navigating with a different smart city light aesthetics. So that's also very prominent practice in Indian cities now. This is kind of a work I think I should move, taking time into consideration. The kind of tactics that Indian nocturnal citizens are practicing is kind of this half-shutter shops, this transit hubs. So this kind of informality, I think this negotiation, improvisation, and they're kind of inhabiting the nocturnal infrastructure to do their business or even the survival. This is just one theoretical provocation I just want to use here. Like in nocturnal urban theory, like there are this idea of the effective atmosphere and assemblage. I think Professor Robert Shaw in his writing is constantly engaged with the idea of effective atmosphere and assemblage. I kind of, because I'm speaking from the cities of the global south, like India, I bring the idea of another loose ligature. It's like a surround, where Simon is kind of, Professor Abdul Malik Simon is saying it's kind of very disparate and to each other, and there's kind of a simultaneous dynamics of the space, time, and practice happening all at a time. Surround doesn't have a kind of a clear objective or agenda of interdependence. As a result, for example, I just want to one ethnographical reading while doing my fieldwork. So kind of in a late night Delhi street, a working woman from a call center or IT company found herself stranded when her car broke down. She received assistance from the homeless sleepers and informal street vendors in the night. But when the police patrol car arrived at the scene, homeless sleepers quickly dispersed, and the woman refrained from disclosing the homeless individual's assistance in front of the police. Later, she spoke with the people who had come to her aid, and understanding that homeless are kind of vulnerable target for law enforcement and making their incident unlikely to be replicated in urban setting. So it's kind of very ephemeral in practice, which also Simon is talking about, like a concomitant, like in a night scene when something is happening that also affect the other. So it's a kind of very concomitant nature of the spatial practice. I think my ethnographic fieldwork shows how India's nights informality are kind of hinged on a kind of a navigational practice. Nocturnal urban theory exists, I think, still at the periphery of our critical urban theory, and my conceptualization emphasis on this political potential. So like my conceptualization of everyday informality in the cities of global south kind of translate in nocturnal practices. And I want to keep thinking about from the lens of the discontinued citizenship, marginal communities, the act of the police enforcement, where Ruth Gilmore talking about the abolition geographies. But what I also very much interested or rather committed to do kind of a multi-scalar project that this idea of Everynight shouldn't maybe focus on the micropolitics of Indian metropolis at this stage, but it should also have a connection, like, how it's happening in other places of this world. So it's a kind of produce a conversation between the cities of global south and global north. And I think through this project, I want to kind of create a kind of autonomous design, which is, focus on more on like a problem of communal concern and place-based urban imaginations. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm Erika Mangione from the Politecnico of Turin and the Future Urban Legacy Lab laboratory. And I'm going to present a project we have done together with Professor Loris Servillo, Marta Montanini, and Monica Postiglione. And this is a project we developed in two main contexts. The first one is the Horizon 2020 project Smartest, which ended in September, and which was about analyzing different forms of human mobility, mainly tourist mobility, but in the case of Turin, student mobility, and how this kind of mobility drive social exclusion and drive spatial transformation in the city. In Turin, we concentrate on students, and here you can see an image where we identify the university branches we recently opened in a part of the city, and which also attract investments in student housing, but also with that student population living in the area and new nighttime venue, the raise in that area, and that create issues related with the use of the space during the night. So the Smartest project in the last work package has the objective to develop city labs in 7 cities, including Turin, that were intended as community of practice where the researcher had to contact the local stakeholders and work toward those social exclusion processes in order to identify inclusive solutions. On the other hand, we have the municipality of Turin, which asked us as a research center to work toward a project called Mover la Movida. Particularly, we work with the Department of Youth Policies and Urban Regeneration. And the title of the project already said a lot in the sense that the idea of the municipality here was to try to think about strategies to move people from some areas of the city where the aggregation during the night was too high, in their opinion, to other places around the city. Of course, this was a critical approach in our opinion, so we tried to, as I will show you, propose a different one. But the context of the city is the one that also Enrico Petrilli yesterday showed us. So we saw in the last years the closure of nighttime venues, but also on the other side, the attraction of student and tourist population and the promotion of a nighttime economy in some central neighborhood, raising conflictuality because of this people concentration during the night between commercial activities, bar clients, local residents, and the city. And the city was sentenced to pay substantial compensation to residents this year. This sentence was in last autumn because of the noise pollution during the night. So the city has a response, apply securitarian and control kind of measures. So our job was at this crossroad between the objective to develop a city lab together with the local stakeholders, but also to work together with the municipality into these nighttime issues. So our mandate and also the time we had, which was less than 1 year, was limited. And so this limit also the object of the analysis and the type of the stakeholders. And how, as I will show you, we define some specific aspects, even if we know that the night is a universe of very different dimension. Our approach was about co-design, so participatory methods were applied, multidisciplinary in the sense that also the research team was made of people from the sociology field, the urban planning, geography, and we try also to be inclusive in terms of, as I will show you, include as more stakeholders as possible and widening this arena. So the objectives were to test a method for co-designing the musical and cultural offer at night in 2 ways. On the one hand, to set the condition for the co-construction of a shared program of the nightlife, focusing on music and culture-led intervention, and on the other hand, to steer the nightlife intervention toward inclusivity and polycentricity to support urban regeneration processes and hybrid places. So our work involved 69 participants representing 40 entities, from nightclub managers, music festival organizers, but also scholars and researchers, journalists, association of many kinds, members of interdepartmental table of the Turin municipality on nighttime, which means official from the Turin municipality from different departments, from the youth and culture, from the events, public safety, equal opportunity. So the process was between October and June 23, October 22, June 23. The first step was about the attempt to build a collective knowledge of the issues. So we analyzed the Turin socio-spatial context, and we mapped all the phenomena, but also the commercial activities. And we tried to collect as many data as we could, also because the municipality asked these, because they don't have any, or they don't have so much data in order to understand the problem. We interview some key stakeholders to frame the themes, the drivers through elicitation. The second step was the two workshops we made. We made this workshop with around 50 participants each. The first one was about trying to make priority needs and vision to emerge, to discuss the drivers of the phenomena we observed during the nighttime, and to also to try to build some scenario for the future. The second was about strategy development, so discussing also tools and policies, but also practical intervention in 1 and 5 years in order to go in the direction of the night that we all imagine as a better future. The third step was the last one, in which we try to communicate what we have done, first with an event with 100 citizens, young citizens. Of course, it was just a small part of our target, and then there were this official presentation of the final report with the members of the municipality. But we are still in a phase in which we, as research group, are trying to propose further opportunity of debate in the city about the results. So which are the outcomes? Here I will show you a graph representing what the community, let's say all the stakeholders and all the participants represent as the actual context. So we see a context in Turin about the nighttime music and cultural activities that see a lack of coordination between the stakeholders, of dialogue and mediation also between the municipality and the other actors on the scene. And so an individual approach and lack of shared solution, which produce an isolated programming, and nightlife operators which focus on basic survival strategy. As a consequence, we have not just a lack of communication, but also less initiative related to accessibility, inclusivity, and all those activities which are not surviving with their activity. On the other hand, I'm sorry, but I don't know why this, okay. On the other hand, we see from the part of the municipality an emergency-led and spot intervention, which obviously limit the support to creativity and cultural projects. And so as a consequence, a lack of experimentation, and the perspective on the night has a public problem. So here again, okay. And so in the end, the conclusion is that the picture is the one of a night which is not inclusive, nor for the people going out during the night, nor for the stakeholders which are trying to propose activities. But on the other end, what came out was also something about the nightlife of the future. And here we have a very rich picture in which all the person participating in our process propose a very interesting view. So the nightlife of the future, according to this journey we made, will be public and busy and occupies public and daytime spaces, scattered and made of recurring and small, medium-sized events. And this is something that goes against the idea of the mega event, which the municipality is really trying to foster. A night which is innovative and a generative time of creativity, free and non-dichotomic, a time of overcoming dichotomies, binary visions, and categorization, but also in continuity with the day, and open to European and international experience and to the exchange with the outside. So to conclude, a few key items to really summarize, our proposition to the municipality was to try to move from the movida representation of the nighttime phenomenon, which is a negative way to represent it, to reflect more about this aggregation in the nighttime which are made by people. Also, look at the security not just as an absence of crime, but as something that needs the night to be populated and rather than controlled, and the governance which should move from the reaction to emergency to long-term strategy. So the conclusion is that the case of Turin is an example in a context in Italy where we saw very similar approaches around, which show the cities at the crossroad now. So on the one hand, we can continue with a security and unsuccessful approach to nightlife problems, or rather we can move toward urban governance that does not focus only on emergency, but consider the night in its complexity. Of course, with our process, we try to go in this direction, and some members of the municipality try to follow us. But what happens in the end is that our work and the work of the stakeholders engaged were exploited, which means that the municipality used instrumentally our work in a plan, at least they call it like this, but it's not, it's everything but a plan, to govern the night, where they basically apply security measures. And they also, in our opinion, underestimate the stakeholder engagement, which are still waiting for their work to be appreciated and used by the municipality. And so now that we are approaching the autumn and the winter, we see that the debate and the political activity in this direction is slowly disappearing. And so probably we will need to wait the next summer in order to see some other kind of move in this direction. Thank you very much.
I think I might start now. I'm Bengisu. We met with a couple of you, but not all of you. So I've been conducting a research on nightlife, public spaces, and community relations for a while now. I'm actually an interior architect, but I'm currently pursuing a PhD in gender studies. Today I'm going to talk about our research, which I've been conducting in collaboration with my dear friend Meriç, who is sitting back there. She also have a presentation tomorrow morning. This research is in fact a result of both of our interests and personal observations in Istanbul. We are investigating the relationship between social interactions in public spaces and leisure time within socio-political framework. In this context, we aim to demonstrate how everyday participatory practices in the subcultural communities of Beyoğlu and Kadıköy These are the main entertainment venues in Istanbul, actually, are central to the construction of a radical political resistance in urban life. Young people collectively struggle to become a part of the city nowadays in Istanbul and the leisure practices. So as a result, they have been continuing their social interactions in informal gathering areas within the city for years. These areas offered individuals and collectives the possibility to challenge the passive observation of the oppressive regulations of nightlife practices and the right to the city. At least this used to be the case in Istanbul until recently, like maybe 20 years ago. It started to change a lot. So the street culture and informal socialization, which we refer as spaces, are crucial areas where communities and various identities can assert their right to exist in public space through everyday life practices, especially in the face of political oppression in Turkey. In our research, we aim to explore not only the characteristics of those spaces, but also how they contribute to resistance. When we started this research, actually, we had two fundamental questions in mind. These are, what is the extent and the nature of the connection between these venues, these public spaces, and nightlife within a theoretical framework of everyday resistance? Which social and spatial aspects play a prominent role in shaping the characteristics of street socialization as spaces for resistance against restrictions? The gradual decline of the spaces is a consequence of the repressive regime's stance and prohibitions concerning public space and entertainment practices. So we are aiming to understand how the continuity of the spaces is maintained is crucial for subcultures to actualize their identities and how they provide a form of everyday resistance through entertainment practices. It's worth noting that organized resistance has been under a really struggle to find a place in public space in Turkey because of the oppressive regime. Therefore, the spaces are able to provide users everyday life practices, and it's able to turn themselves into a resistance with their ordinary acts within the fabric of everyday life. So when I'm gonna talk about our research, I need to talk about a bit about Beyoğlu, which is a main entertainment venue in Istanbul, to underscore the importance of this research. Beyoğlu has been a hub for entertainment culture and a space for marginalized communities even since the Ottoman Empire. It's not a recent place where it developed to become an entertainment venue. However, it has faced continuous pressures and restrictions on both identities and entertainment culture, not only from the current administrations, but dating back to the 1960s even. So as a result of these pressures and restrictions, the openness in the public space has been lost. So I will, this little map showing you the recent restrictions in the entertainment culture in Beyoğlu. Actually, the most severe restrictions started in 2011, where the government of Istanbul decided to restrict all of the tables and chairs in the open areas of the venues. This was the most critical thing for Beyoğlu because people were going there to socialize in the street, just sit in a place, drink something, and then talk to each other, just interact and socialize. But then when these tables and chairs are removed, we lost the streets actually. Then this restriction continued with another ban in the same year, preventing street musicians from using the speakers or amplifiers. Then on 2013, as many of you probably already heard of it, the Occupy Gezi Park resistance happened in Beyoğlu. It's really close by the places that I'm talking about at the moment. And the streets and the struggle between the government and the people, the inhabitants of Beyoğlu, becoming more visible every day. Until 2015, the governance decided to make repairs and renovations on the streets and sidewalks of Beyoğlu. So people weren't allowed to actually go and walk in the streets freely. So that actually resulted in people's choice on going out at night. People decided not to go to the Beyoğlu anymore because it was full with dust, it was full of construction all the time with the noise and everything. So this was actually not a ban, but another strategy for the government to put people away from Beyoğlu. And on 2014, this is actually really interesting. We have another open air socializing space. We have this really big tower at the in the Beyoğlu called Galata Tower, and next to the Galata Tower, people used to get their drinks and spend the whole night there and just socialize with strangers and everyone. But however, again, the government decided to put a tea shop there, and so people weren't allowed to drink alcohol and go there. This is what happened in 2014. So in 2015 and 17, they decided to make some public gathering bans, like it's the first time they banned the Pride Parade in Beyoğlu, and on 2017 they banned the New Year celebrations in Taksim Square also. If I'm talking too detailed, I'm not sure how I'm managing the time, but yeah. So this was a bit continued process like this, but until 2020. On 2020, as you all also had the same problems, we had COVID-19 and the restrictions came with that. The nightclubs are temporarily closed, and any activities regarding entertainment or any of the venues weren't able to work during the night. But even with the COVID-19 prohibitions got a bit relaxed, the music ban in the venues after 12 p.m. just continued. On 2020, they just changed it to 1 a.m., but until very recently, like 2 months ago, we still had the music ban in the nationwide in Turkey. This is actually not really related, but I really love this poster. It shows how powerful the Beyoğlu is. This is from 2014, where they banned the Galata Tower socialization. People decided to make a demonstration, and this poster says, "If Beyoğlu is silent, Turkey is silent." But unfortunately, we didn't able to gain it back. So anyways, it was a long introduction. But if we return to the topic at the hand, we are focusing on a street with a wide set of stairs located in the intersection of Cihangir, Taksim and Tophane neighborhoods in Beyoğlu. All these neighborhoods have very different socio-cultural users. Taksim is known as the heart of entertainment in the city, while Cihangir was a bit more gentrified place in the 80s, pushing the transgender individuals away and attracting more socioeconomically advantaged groups. On the other hand, Tophane is one of the rare places around Beyoğlu that has been Muslim since the Ottoman period and still maintains its conservatism. The stairs are often referred as no stairs because they are situated in the corner of a venue called Novradio, and these stairs are actually somehow became the center of the open-air entertainment and informal socialization since 2020 and 2021. This is the stairs. I don't know if I'm able to show it, and this is the venue called Novradio. So people are usually gathered around this area. It's more than 200 people, sometimes even gathered there each day of the week. So all of the subcultures, young people, everyone is just coming to this area for socialization. So we can summarize our conceptual framework within this graphic for the research we are conducting at the moment. We have a three-pillar research with one focus is on nightlife practices, one focuses on space, and one focuses on subcultures and the otherness. So no stairs constitute the first pillar of our research, associating with transscience with informal gatherings. We actually aim to understand how the landscape and public spaces have changed concerning nightlife restrictions and regulations. So to achieve this, we began by researching how the users of the space developed tactics, as in the searcher says. So we conducted actually 6 interviews to understand those tactics, and during these interviews we aimed to understand how this space became a focal point for resistance, how individuals ascribed socio-spatial meanings, and what tactics users and the space employed in their resistance against restrictions. We also wanted to learn about the challenges experienced by users to understand the effects of dynamism of public space in this area. In addition, we are still researching actually another venue in Kadıköy, which we haven't still completed yet. So for our interviews, we developed a set of codes which evolved as we analyzed the interviews. Among these codes, tactics were the most essential ones. Tactics, as the searcher says, are distinct from strategies, and dynamic are constantly related to their surrounding. Tactics are more related to time than space, which is why tactics we learned from these interviews can be adapted to other times and places. That's we were aiming to do, like learning how these tactics allow the space to become a resistant space, and if it's possible to arrange these tactics and transform these tactics for another places, so people have more resistant venues, more resistant places in the city during the night. So these were the codes that we came through in our interviews. First, people were defining the activities, what they're doing in the stairs, and how they define the space, what are the most essential things regarding those spaces, and what do they think about resistance, why they're resisting, for what they're resisting actually. And they're also talking about a lot of about the dominance, about the restrictions, about the ideological dominance, about the material dominance, and how they're defining the users. And these were the main tactics that we came through our research. Community building was the first one, and the street culture and informal gathering practices are the second one. Being anti-discriminative is the third one. These 3 were the most essential ones that we came in front of our interviews. Okay, I'm finishing really close by. Sorry. So the street culture had the most actually, had the most taught tactic, and it was really in touch with the music and positive needs in the street, and community building practices and being freeing. And sorry, I think I missed the names, but community building was the second one, where people gather with friends and socialize with strangers, and where they resist against special restrictions through leisure elements. Actually, being anti-discriminative was, of course, one of the most essential ones through the identities. I'm being really past in my 2 slides left only. So through our analysis, we came in touch that the most important code that we came through was the space's relation with security. The second one was socializing, and the third one was music, and the fourth one was restrictions. And the most essential tactic was the community building, where the people, the inhabitants of the north stairs, were using it against the restrictions. And then being anti-discriminative was again by far really essential, because there were again queer people, there were punk people in here, there were any of the young community was there, and the street culture, like keeping the street culture alive and organizing these informal gatherings was the third one. So yeah, this is my thank you, guys. Okay.
Hi everyone. I know I'm standing between you and lunch, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. So thanks for having me. I'm Jess. I'm an assistant professor of data science at the University of Virginia. And the work that I brought here today is kind of like a reflection about data broadly understood. So I've been working at this intersection of critical data studies and night studies and doing lots of translational work, which means I work a lot with governments, trying to convince them to improve or enhance policies related to data, related to nightlife governance. I work at mostly in Brazil and Latin America and in Canada. Those are the examples that I brought here today. And what I want to discuss about like being visible, and I think it's cool because I was listening to your discussion yesterday about like, can we trust data from the police? Can we trust numbers? What are the limitations of certain data that we had available for us to understand the night? So I want to talk a little bit about like being visible. What does that mean for governance, for surveillance, for inclusion in our city? So rethinking this approach that we have and like trying to foster informal, illegal, if you don't like this word, almost invisible activities in our cities and turn them into like proper governance mechanisms. And I brought an overview of 3 projects that I think they exemplify different approaches to data visibility. They span across 12 years of ethnographic work. And today I'm talking about like 2 cities in Brazil, 1 city in Canada. All these like informal, do-it-yourself cultural practice that are usually at the margins of the city, both socially, culturally, and also in terms of regulation. Always negotiating their legitimacy to occupy spaces in the city and thinking about how people are telling their stories, how we are collecting this data, archiving this data, and process the data, especially for this kind of informal night activities. They are not in well-established archives, they are in police records, they are in newspapers archives, they are born digital archives that the communities themselves gather over time. And this creates a lot of data invisibilities, and I've been working with this concept of nocturnal data invisibility. That's this constant balance that we need to find, this dichotomy of being visible, because on one hand, we need this visibility to be part of public policy, to access resources, to denounce police brutality in certain spaces as well, to be properly governed and telling our stories, but at the same time, there is a strategic invisibility, especially for like marginalized communities. Being visible does not necessarily mean being safe. And so it's important to take this into account and do not turn certain communities into targets, because we hear a lot of like, we need more data. Not all data will keep people safe, and certain data should not be available to everybody. And so I have like 3 studies that I've done over the years that I want to talk to you. 3 levels of visibility. First one wants to remain visible. The second one wants to be visible. And the third one is a hybrid. And so all these questions about how we count things and people and turn that into policy for the night. So this is a hardcore punk scene. And we have like the straight edge subculture within it, very famous in São Paulo, lasted for over 25 years. This really fragmented history that we can only find in really ephemeral archives, all the zines, the oral history, born digital archives, the academic work that needed to be vouched for. They didn't allow any academic to go in there and document the scene. So it's like really fragmented. And you can imagine that punk shows are really noisy. So they started doing the concerts in their homes and then move it to a warehouse. So they move it around the city a lot. And at some point, they were struggling to make the event accessible as they want to be, to get funding for the events, and dealing with gentrification, these topics that are like very common to the things we are seeing here in this event. And so, but they didn't want to be visible at all. They had involvement with like direct action and the free fair movement in São Paulo. They tried to occupy the night as much as possible. There was a time limitation because of public transit. They wanted to make the events accessible by public transit. And so at some point they were using a strip club in downtown São Paulo at Praça Roosevelt. So it was really interesting to see that like the punk scene occupying that space in the afternoon and until 10-11 p.m. and then we had to leave, and then like the other clients and sex workers would come to work. So that one is the former strip club, and all these places, they don't even exist anymore. They were torn down. The place has been gentrified, and we have like lots of like upcoming condos and some like really very specific establishments of entertainment there. So all the historical theaters and like this kind of sex work district is no longer there. And so they did not want to be visible at all. And like, how can we incorporate this, like not wanting to be visible into our data points and our data sets? How can we foster this kind of informal communities without putting them on the spotlight if they don't want to? And busking is another, like on the other side of this equation, we have busking. And I did field work with them for 5 years in Canada and Brazil. And I usually start telling the story in Rio that the buskers were being harassed by the police constantly. So they really wanted some kind of regulation that allowed them to be in the streets. We had none. So it was always framed as public disorder. Police took them away from the metro, from public squares. They decided that they would get involved into lawmaking and policy making. And how can you convince the municipal government that you matter? Like they said, we need numbers. So they started to count themselves, and they conducted this kind of like informal census of buskers in Rio. The methodology was completely flawed, was a mess, but it was very interesting to see. They mapped it at first 700 people, and then later on they claimed to have 4,500 in the city of Rio itself, like just the city of Rio. And you can imagine that even doing field work in these spaces is really complicated, because how do you track buskers? Yeah, and so I had to develop like all this methodological framework to keep track of them, to interview them, to like spend time with buskers. And then you start to see their connection to not only the city at night, performing at night until the time they're allowed to, but also like performing in clubs as well and in restaurants. So there's like this network of spaces of busking that's not only like the public space itself. And so they took these numbers to the city government, and this authority of data and the scholarship that talks about like how we trust number and we think numbers, and this narrow view of data is a true reflection of reality, not necessarily, and also like raise these issues of governance, like being disorderly in public spaces, noise, of course, that's one of the main complaints, but also like criminalization of poverty, in the precarity of these informal workers in public space. And it's really hard to understand like their needs in terms of policies, funding, how can we keep them sustainable? The pandemic kind of like exacerbated these issues, because how could they perform if there was no one in the streets or in the metro? And like being very careful to not turn this visibility into surveillance as well. And in this age of like AI and big data and needing more data, like facial recognition technology, and you put something like cameras, CCTV systems, and like surveil them, and then take them away from whatever like the places you feel they should not be there, where they don't belong. And this works for like above ground, and underground is even worse, even more like surveillance spaces if you think about metro systems. And then we have kind of like this hybrid approach. And we conducted what we call community-based data collection. It's not like from the government, it's not official, but we did this for the government and with the communities in Montreal. It started in 2020. During the pandemic, ironically, we started to think about like nightlife policy, and the city appointed the first commissioner for night and noise at the time. And we're working with her to kind of like have a report mapping the informal nights of Montreal, known for having a vibrant nightlife, really flawed governance mechanism, lots of noise complaints. People say like it's a city that is intolerant to noise, and so many spaces have been shutting down over the last years because of noise complaints and fines. And I'm talking about like small music venues and independent spaces as well. So as researchers, we had this channel of communication with the city, and we had to prepare reports for them and kind of like brief them on how nightlife is important and how can we support the informal night of the city without turning them into targets. And so we had to write policy recommendations. Data was something that everyone wanted. And what people mean sometimes by data is not just like the economic numbers or huge data sets. They want to know like how many permits we have for like alcohol, or where are these places, or how much money is available, where is the money going. So there are different ways. And other communities want to know, like they want numbers on like violence and discrimination. How can we map that? It's like very difficult. And so we talked a lot. We have like a second round with public consultation with several groups of people. We focus like artists, performers, residents, youth, and also like the queer communities, people leading this kind of informal nightlife or being part of them as like consumers of those establishments. And so we had to build this relationship of trust to gather this information that's pretty qualitative. We do have numbers, and then have all this discussion about the ethics of the work that we do in turning these things visible to the city government, because the intention was really good. And then we talked to people, and it's like, yeah, Montreal is like discriminates a lot towards like racialized communities and immigrants. And we say that women are usually very safe in the city, but we cannot even start talking about like people beyond the binary, or people who like are at the intersection of certain social identities in the city. So we don't even have data for that. And then we had to write this policy recommendations with like great responsibility, and so like how can we foster those spaces as like spaces of care beyond this kind of like legal, illegal, formal, informal, really narrow ways to view the city. And even for data visualization, you can imagine that what happens if we just pinpoint in a map where all the do-it-yourself parties and the illegal raves are in the city and handle this to the government? It's like, hey, here's our study, go there. So we didn't want that to happen, of course. So we had to really think about ways to make the information available. And all these resources, they're open access, they're available in French. Unfortunately, we don't have other languages yet. And then we had like this conversation about turning things visible to the city government. So they know these places exist, they know these communities are there, but we are not like pinpointed as like a really general area in the city without like much of like details where it is, or so they cannot send the police over there, hopefully. And then like parts of the recommendations were just maybe like fund researchers, because we have like so many researchers in that city looking at this informal nightlife activities and night in general and culture, like fund these people, maybe have like an observatory, gather data. When you publish open data, be careful so personal information is not there, or you're not like creating mechanisms to harm more people. So we like had all this conversation for 2 years. I was part of the Night Council. I had a mandate for 2.5 years. So it was interesting. I was very lucky to see both sides, academic and the policy in there. We didn't go much like further down the line, and now we're waiting to see like what the city will bring us in terms of policy, because we have like all these working groups. We put so many hours, so many efforts to try to create this together, and we haven't seen the results yet, and the context change because these things change quickly. So this also like creates maybe a reflection to us as researchers, and specifically like I'm in data science, and like kind of having this future data scientists thinking about like what's reliable data, how can we make people visible or invisible, and how can we not be extractivists, just go there, gather all the data that we need, and then like just lead to those communities. So how can we build these long-lasting relationships and do like the visibility thing responsibly? And to wrap this up, like we see this increasing demands for more data so we can better govern the cities. And usually it does not include citizen-generated data or just community efforts to tell stories, just fragmented archives, oral history. So all this should like be also incorporated in nocturnal policymaking, and how like to talk to governments and policymakers about the importance of this fragmented data, finding this balance between making the night visible and governable, but also avoiding surveillance and control, and think about this multiplicity of senses and notions and definitions of the night as like the space of care and community, but also like control, surveillance, space to be governed, and usually like as economic development, but it's much more, and like incorporating this more invisible communities in there in a responsible, ethical, human rights based approach. So that's what I have to say.